Europe must seize Russia's billions, demanded these protesters, especially as the US pulls back its support to Ukraine.
We needed to reconstruct what Putin has destroyed in Ukraine.
Ukrainians have long argued that since Russia invaded Ukraine, the defense bill and reparations should be paid for with the frozen Russian assets held by Western countries. In 2022, as Russia invaded Ukraine, Western nations froze around 300 billion euros of Russian reserves. Of that, around 200 billion euros is held by Europe, most of it at a financial institution in Brussels called Euroclear. Last year, G7 countries decided to loan 50 billion euros to Ukraine, paid for by the interest on the total. In January this year, the first installment of that loan, 3 billion euros, was disbursed towards Ukraine's war effort.
And you men are brave, but they had to use our military.
With the about-turn in US policy, the G7's commitment to Ukraine has come into question. As the EU controls the largest chunk of the frozen assets, it could play the decisive role. But member states are divided. While the Baltic states, who are situated closer to Russia and perhaps face a bigger threat to their security, advocate seizing the entire sum of around 200 billion, others like Belgium oppose touching the principle.
That is something that can really shock the world financial order. We should not take it lightly.
Contractually, any interest earned on the frozen assets belongs to Euroclear. The principal remains Russian property. Experts warn that seizing the principal would send a negative message to investors.
The question is whether the EU wants countries outside of the EU to be comfortable in putting their reserves in euro assets and in assets held in the EU, like at Euroclear, or whether they want to those countries to perceive a risk.
Other EU members, like France, believe the Russian assets are a security guarantee to police any future peace deal, as Washington sidelines Europe and deals directly with Moscow.
It is a tool of leverage that we have with Russia. It's a tool in the negotiation.
But the EU could lose its remaining leverage if Hungary refuses to renew EU sanctions against Moscow. Russian reserves are being held at Euroclear in this building, but European sanctions have stopped Russia from withdrawing or reinvesting its reserves. However, these sanctions have to be renewed every 6 months, and Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban, a Russian ally, has repeatedly tried to block them. Now, as US's policy towards Ukraine shifts under Donald Trump, there is a growing fear that Orban may feel emboldened to exercise his veto. So the EU is considering other options and has agreed to discuss an international claims commission for Ukraine. The idea is to create legal avenues for frozen Russian assets to fund a part of Ukraine's reconstruction. That could cost 450 billion euros over the next decade, says the World Bank, and the EU now expects it will have to foot the bill.